Inexplicably, men are considered to be entirely unaffected, mentally or emotionally, by something as completely life-changing as having a child.
I specialise and counsel mothers who suffer with postnatal depression, and recently we set up a new project which aims to help fathers and support fathers who may also be suffering with depression following the birth of their baby. People do talk about hormone imbalance, but actually the research on that is not conclusive. We tend to think about depression following the birth of a baby as being a major life transitional phase, and with any life transitional phase it can cause a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Fathers, new fathers, aren't asked how they're feeling and how they're coping with a new baby. All the attention is actually focused on the mother. Perhaps a mother or a father may not feel supported. They may struggle to cope with the reality of having the baby, because the media does portray motherhood and fatherhood as being quite glamorous, and babies should have all the latest designer gear. We don't often see mothers or fathers with a baby on the shoulder with sick running down.
Do you think fathers are increasingly suffering from postnatal depression?
Well, we do believe that there are more pressures on fathers nowadays. The new man concept, whereby men are expected to be present at the birth, men are expected to feed and change baby, they're expected to do everything apart from breastfeed. Do men have choices anymore? That's a big question. Most men, the woman want them by their side, and it is a shock for the man, and then they have to leave and go home, and they're all on their own and leave their partner and their baby in the hospital. So I guess again we need to be looking at how we can keep young families together at that stage, and maybe hospitals have the facilities where fathers can stay at least for the first night with their partners and baby. We do know from the number of young men we have on the wards, 70% of those in mental health wards are actually fathers. Society still expects men to be the stronger sex, but from our research that we've carried out, we know that men are just as vulnerable as women.
You'd say equally vulnerable?
Yes.
Sometimes babies are just abandoned and left to die by their mothers. Look at how the BBC portrays an example of this abuse.
And abandoned at 2 days old, the baby girl discovered in a cardboard box.
Anyone abandoning such a tiny, helpless baby must have felt desperately alone and very scared. The police understand that, and they're keen to stress to Becky's mum they want to help her. Most of all, they want to reunite her with her beautiful daughter.
Why do we seek to reunite the child with this mother? Does child abuse get much worse than leaving a 2-day-old baby outside next to waste bins in November? You see a positive attitude towards abusive mothers in TV shows as well. Even when mothers kill their babies, they're still somehow good people.
She's responsible for the death of a child. I can't just ignore it.
She was a battered woman, Ken. It's not going to happen again. She's a good mother.
And what about drug-addicted mothers?
Now, each year in Britain, thousands of drug users become pregnant, and often the child ends up being removed from the mother. Now, a new scheme in Sheffield is giving more help to pregnant drug users with the aim of keeping the mother and child together.
It doesn't take long to get an answer. Baby David is suffering from withdrawal.
But you mustn't see this as a failure, because it's not. Because you did really, really well during your pregnancy.
So a woman can throw her baby away, she can addict her baby to heroin, and she can even murder her baby, but she's not necessarily a bad mother. But when a man so much as disciplines a child, maybe to stop the kid robbing me in 20 years, he must be removed from parenting.
A father of two revealed today how he was separated from his family after being spotted by a policeman giving his 3-year-old son a single but hard smack on the bottom. In the 6 months it took for the case to come to court, The man was banned from the family home and allowed no unsupervised contact.
What is it about our society that's so determined to punish men at every opportunity, yet afford women every excuse imaginable for their crimes? Child sexual abuse is something that adults do to children, yet it's only ever presented as a crime committed by men. Frequently we hear of paedophile rings and internet porn, and even abductions of children by paedophiles, exclusively male paedophiles. What do you think is the common image of a paedophile?
I think the common image of a paedophile is a nasty man in a raincoat, dirty Mac, hanging around a playground. If you ask children, they'll say they wear balaclavas and they smell and they've got beards and quite often sunglasses.
Yeah, well, you've got the typical smelly fat old man with a beard and really thick glasses and slightly balding, and just he's constantly sweating, whether it's the middle of winter or not.
An older man who with no friends, kind of, you know, the older geek, the internet stalker. Yeah, it is a man though.
The raincoat, the dirty old man brigade, you know, the kind of lone, and this does tend to be a male image actually, so I have to be honest there. You know, the lone man on his own, you know, loitering, hanging around.
Which is, I realise, biased by the media, by my expectations.
We're actually not trustworthy as humans. We're somehow hairy and brutish. We've got this big thing between our legs that controls us. And if you're with a little child, your little child, and you're sleeping together, that somehow these uncontrollable man urges will suddenly rise to the fore.
We have countless people at our meetings saying, you know, there are these sort of, perhaps not actual allegations, but suggestions out there. Yeah. And we have to say, well, you know, just be a bit wary about having your child in your bed. I know when my child was...
That is
crazy.
Is a disgrace.
It is crazy,
That is disgusting and a disgrace.
Yeah. Would you say that our society ignores female sexual abuse of children?
I think society wants to believe, particularly in relation to mothers and children and to that relationship, that that's a sacred relationship. And I'd like to believe that. I mean, I must tell you that as a mother myself, I find the idea of women sexually abusing children more abhorrent than just about anything I can think of. Because most mothers, and indeed fathers, would kill to protect their children. They would do anything to protect their children. And the fact that that has been betrayed makes it more difficult for society to acknowledge it. Because if you acknowledge it, where do you go from there? You know, do you start warning children about everybody? Do you start saying we're not sure mothers are safe?
Women, you don't imagine a woman using her power over children in the same way that you would imagine a man could.
Fathers are often falsely accused of child sexual abuse by women seeking custody of a child and to ensure punishment for the man she no longer loves.
Domestic violence, you must hear it all the time to stop dads from seeing their kids.
Well, that's not the only sort of allegation. What about sexual abuse? It's very easy for the mother to say and very difficult for the father to disprove.
And then the second thing, if that doesn't work fast enough, they call it the silver bullet in Canada. That means that she claims that he's molested the children. And that means that he's immediately then barred from everything, and the divorce goes straight through, and he loses his children, and he will never see them again.
Divorce cases, custody cases, we're seeing more and more and more of that, where the woman wanting to get full custody of the child is suddenly, out of the blue, making allegations that the father has abused the child and is coaching the child to say the same. When you talk to the child, however, and they cannot describe the sounds, the tastes, the smells, and all of that, you can start to know that they've been coached because they're just parroting words. But it's so destructive, both to the child. I have no patience at all with parents who use that, with the mothers who use that as an allegation against fathers to keep them from their children. I think that is wicked.
Does it only tend to be that one way? Mothers
it does
fathers?
Tend to be, yes. We have. I don't know of any cases, there may be some, where the father is alleged abuse by the mother to get custody of the child.
In your experience, how many of the allegations of abuse or violence are substantiated?
Well, I think that's a very difficult question. I would think probably not a lot.
If a man who has recently separated from his partner, wife, whoever, and has his 4 or 5-year-old child in the bed with him...
But isn't that sad?
Maybe.
But it's women that are more likely to use their child as some sort of substitute.
According to the people who contacted me, it would quite often just be them and the mother in the home. And for the little boys, when they were little boys, they were almost used as if they were the husband. And the little girls were abused as well. So
The sustained attack on men from every news outlet and so many agencies has successfully caused every member of society to treat men as automatically suspect. Men increasingly think of each other as potential paedophiles, and perfectly normal men will question their own thoughts and actions around children. I recall one man during the Madeleine McCann disappearance telling me he could imagine men passing her round for abuse. What's happening in our society that could prompt a thought like that about men, from a man, when the likelihood is that such abuse exists in imagination only? When we hear hoofbeats behind us, how have we been programmed to think zebras and not horses? If we were to begin to treat women with the same suspicion as men are treated in this area, we'd have to look at women that choose to be single mothers. Having children as a single parent is so incredibly difficult. Why would women willingly choose to do this, unless they wanted to be at home, by themselves, with helpless children? The NSPCC barely talks about female abusers, because attacking men seems to be the main purpose of their campaigns, not the genuine safety of children. That's why they have virtually nothing to say about the numbers of female abusers, and why, for example, they say nothing at all about smoking and drinking by pregnant women. The NSPCC should be making huge efforts to protect children when they're at the most vulnerable, in the mother's womb. Smoking and drinking alcohol by pregnant women is responsible for 1,000,000 times more damage to children than men have ever done, but they say absolutely nothing about this, which shows that they're not actually concerned about preventing cruelty to children. They only seem concerned about how they can capitalise on it. The NSPCC is not answering a problem with children in our society. They are part of the problem. They cannot be genuinely concerned for children because their actions and their carefully chosen messages tell a different story. They have done and continue to do far more damage to children by attacking the family, the most crucial safety device for children, than they have ever done to help children. The NSPCC should be the biggest supporter of family in the country, because their own figures show the huge benefit of an intact family to child safety. Children are far more likely to be abused outside of a family than within one. But instead, they attack the family, and they attack men. For example, this advert deliberately shows a family unit, what they know to be the safest environment for a child, and then poisons it with their hateful message. Child abuse, and particularly child sexual abuse, are used as weapons by the NSPCC and other agencies as a means to drive a wedge between men and children. The more suspicion that's cast over men, the easier it is to break up families, the more money they make, and the more power they gain. The NSPCC has an army of fundraisers in the form of thousands of people that believe they're working for a good cause by helping out in any way they can. Tens of thousands of people give money every month. Thousands of others run all kinds of events to raise money. For example, one pyramid-type scheme that they run asks one person to organise a coffee morning for 5 other people, and each person pays £1 to the organiser. Then each of those 5 are required to do their own coffee morning for 5 other people. In this way, the money stacks up and all feeds back into the bottomless pit of money that the NSPCC uses to spread hateful messages against men. The NSPCC themselves provide training to child protection officers for thousands of schools and other organisations. It's like training an army of informers to watch everyone and hope to uncover something that they can use against families. In this training, they define what is acceptable in society and how children should be raised. Anyone that deviates is abusive. An example of the good work of the NSPCC concerns homeschooling. The NSPCC doesn't like homeschooling and has said so. The NSPCC wants every child to be under their watchful eyes or the eyes of someone that they've trained, so that children can be kept safe. If you dare to raise your child in any other way, the NSPCC will make a case for abuse, with the chief suspect being you. It's thanks to the efforts of the NSPCC and other charities that our society positively expects child abuse to be occurring behind most closed doors.
Welcome to Petergeddon.
People like this are everywhere.
That's why my own children are here with me. Good night, children. They're safe tonight. Are yours?
I doubt it.
It's quite easy to understand why the NSPCC is so hateful towards men, and why its existence is fundamentally anti-family. Imagine two candidates going for the position of Director of Fundraising at the enormous and successful business we know and love as the NSPCC. One candidate suggests a campaign telling the truth about child abuse, about its relatively low prevalence, about how family is the key to child safety, about how we should therefore do everything we can to educate mothers to make good choices before getting pregnant so as to keep family together. The other candidate suggests a campaign singling out men as likely abusers, saying that child abuse is everywhere and is an epidemic of huge proportions, how only the NSPCC can keep children safe and hear every child's cry, and they need your money to do so. The honest candidate makes 50 million. The devious one makes 250 million. Which one will become Director of Fundraising at the NSPCC?
So, for example, NGOs, non-governmental organisations, very large charities, voluntary organisations, many of whom have very explicit political agendas and bend facts, bend what they're saying to fit.
When these atrocities happen, the government steps in and claims responsibility. There's a huge outcry, the media goes into a frenzy, and heads roll in various departments. There's a public inquiry, and laws and practices change to make sure that it never happens again. The police and social services gain new powers to remove children from parents. Social workers are put under intense pressure to increase the number of children taken into care or risk losing their jobs.
With these kids that are being taken into care because mum's got a low IQ. So it seems now that social workers, in their endeavour to get more kids being put up for adoption, well, how can we do that? Right, all these people that can't, we don't think, look after their kids properly, we're going to push them up for adoption. So you've got half a dozen cases in Essex where, because mum's got a low IQ, kids are literally being taken away from her, and she's been told you can see them when you're 18.
It might seem that social services and the police are taking a whipping during these cases, but it's a whipping they're actually glad for, because it ensures that they acquire more power. By accepting responsibility for crimes that their very activities in stripping fathers from children have helped to create, they further take over the role of father from men and make the situation worse. By taking the heat for each outrage that occurs, they're able to award themselves more and more power in what they claim is an attempt to stop future occurrences. The NSPCC cannot keep children safe from this sort of abuse, and they know it. Child protection, real and effective child protection, is not about government departments, social workers or charities. It's about family. You cannot reduce child abuse with more charity donations, any more than you can reduce global warming with more air conditioning. All the NSPCC can do is take donations and then spend it on their offices, on their TV advertising, on their staff salaries, holidays and pensions, and on furthering their political ambitions. The protection of children is unfortunately not what they do best. The NSPCC doesn't need any more money. It's already drowning in money. They use their hundreds of millions to spread hateful messages against men and to destroy families, so that they can then campaign for even more money to fix the resulting mess.
The ridiculous notions that feminists have about relationships are being imposed on the rest of us. And what is forgotten is all of this, is that children need to be hugged, they need to be kissed, they need to be loved, even sometimes by their teachers, you know, especially if they've fallen over, hurt themselves, they're upset, what have you. what we have is a situation where we are governed by organisms, government, feminists, the abusive, whose sole interest is stirring up as much hatred as they possibly can. And we see this all the time in their rhetoric, constantly trying to cast suspicion on those who have intimate relations with each other. Is the man sexually assaulting the child? Is he being domestically violent towards his wife? Is he raping the woman that he's dating? It's all negative. That's a major problem, which the men's movement will obliterate.
Attempts to outlaw smacking, for example, are not about keeping children safe from harm. A smacking ban simply makes it easier to further invade the home, arrest parents, and disrupt family. For their own purposes, the NSPCC is determined to write into law the ludicrous assumption that parents are not able to distinguish between chastisement and physical abuse.
We believe that there's a groundswell of support in Parliament for a complete ban on physical punishment, which means that there'd be a completely clear message to professionals and to parents especially, hitting a child was never okay.
Opponents of an outright ban claimed it would restrict a parent's power to reprimand children who, for instance, run into the road.
Stan, could you just explain what the other option is about the child who runs into the road without giving it a smack if it does it too often?
Grab the child. You pull the child back. You say to the child, you don't do that. There are many ways, I can assure you. There are many ways. And I assure you also that it's a nonsense to put it up as an example, because if you did, in those circumstances, smack your child, do you seriously think that a police officer is going to take you to court to use that? No, no.
But this is exactly what would happen. In fact, it already is happening.
A father of two revealed today how he was separated from his family after being spotted by a policeman giving his 3-year-old son a single but hard smack on the bottom.
That father was kept away from his child and out of his own house for 6 months. This is the kind of society, so desperately craved by the NSPCC and others, that needs a definition of abuse to grow so that they can grow in power.
Well, the abuse industry maintains itself by categorising normal behaviours as acts of abuse. So, for example, whereas 30 years ago, the NSPCC was concerned with the killing and severe beating of children, it's now concerned with smacking children, shouting at children. It has even tried to suggest that 5-year-old boys who have an interest in 5-year-old girls are paedophiles. It's actually used those words. They're not my words, they're the NSPCC's words. You're a psychologist. Harlow's monkeys. Monkeys that are brought up without touch and affection grow up delinquently. They can't bring up their own children. They often kill their own children. There clearly is, there are important reasons why human beings, adults and children, need to be touched. And we know that it affects us. We know how powerful is touch as adults. It makes the world of difference. The children have got to be denied this to a very large extent in their lifestyles from those who are important adults around them.
Do you think that there is stigma attached to any man who wants to work with children or expresses an interest in children?
Yes. There's a voluntary initiative where I work whereby you can go and help children to read part of their reading hour in the local primary school. These are children from about the ages of 4 up to the ages of, say, 9. So I was the only male volunteer at this primary school. And I went there and I'm working with kids about the age of 7 to 9. I did notice I was actually put in at the highest age range and not the lowest, which was interesting. You weren't allowed to be in a class alone with any children. You always had to have the door open. The teacher should be present any time you're with the child. You couldn't make even affectionate gestures to the child. If you tried to sit in your lap, you could move them and put them away. I did feel, going in, I felt really weary that I was the only guy, and having seen the other people who are working there, they can be very affectionate with the children, and I'm very aware of what I'm doing when I kind of almost without thinking say, lean or grab a child's hand to pull him over. I'm aware that it's dodgy, that I have to pull away. Men are generally not wanted in a primary school level.
The point is, you can talk to a 5-year-old all day about how to hold his foot to do something, or you can just grab the foot and do that, and he's learned it from then on. And I just do that now.
Yes.
And before I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I resented the fact that I felt I couldn't do it.
Yeah. If you're a woman, you've had no problem.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. So
Yeah.
I do it now, and no one's, I
Yeah.
dare anyone to say I'm doing anything wrong.
Well, I think what you're
Because I'm
doing
not.
there is what you've described there,
Mm.
on the face of it, seems extremely trivial. But in reality, has a big impact, not only for the way in which you teach and the effectiveness of your teaching, but with regard to how the child feels about you. Because a woman can do that, and so from the child's point of view, oh yes, women are warm and cuddly, but he doesn't. He's cold, he's distant, he's nasty. And that's how he grows up to see you. And you have to behave in this way. Why? Because of the feminists and because of the hysterics in the child abuse industry. These people have, in my view, caused enormous damage. Sorry. These people, in my view, have caused enormous damage. And I have said on my website, I'll say it again, I'm sure you won't put this out, but I think the National Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children has done more harm to our children than all the paedophiles in this country put together. I believe it. I think I can justify it. I think I can prove it to the extent that anything can be proved. And I really am very angry that we have this parasitic organisation in our midst, taking our money, by and large, to demonise men and fathers in the eyes of everybody. Perhaps you don't remember those adverts they were showing maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
No, I probably wasn't tuned.
Well, basically demonising men, casting suspicion on men's relationships with children. They were also at the forefront of the recovered memory, satanic abuse ritual, hysteria. And this organisation has the support of millions of people in this country, and I'd like to see them exposed.
It's what of everyone, it seems. It's a very well-regarded organisation,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's not well regarded by a lot of people who work with children, I'll just say. Social workers are not very keen on the NSPCC because they see it as interference from a bunch of people who do not have as much expertise in dealing with children, but plenty of expertise in raising money, which is what the organisation seems to be about.
It's not possible for the government to keep children safe, and neither is it possible for charities to keep children safe. The only institution that can keep children safe is the one that has a biological investment in the child, the family. Child abuse can only be reduced by keeping the father and mother together. It's that simple. There is no other solution. The presence of the real father is the key to child safety. We don't need more government power, we need government support of family. We don't need parasitic entities like the NSPCC, the Child Support Agency, or Children's Commissioners. What we do need is simply what nature intended: dad, mum, and child.